Good evening, you guys. Welcome to the Awareness Film Festival, which is supporting a nonprofit called Heal One World, which serves disadvantaged communities in the local Los Angeles area for alternative healing. I'm Ruby Lopez. I am the co-chair of the Women in Film International Committee, and I'm your moderator today.
So I'm Kern Konwiser, this is my brother Kp Konwiser, and we are the producers, directors, and writers of the documentary series Make It Work that is playing here at the Awareness Film Festival. And this project, the genesis of this project actually is from Legendary Pictures, the former chairman and the man who started the company, Thomas Tull, who asked my brother and I to do a documentary project that would help to start a conversation among young people about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and to get them really excited about it, activated in it. That there was a coming crisis in our country of a new generation that isn't necessarily equipped to handle all the technology that is coming at them, and how to get them to engage with it as makers, as creators, and not just users of technology. So there was a really big scope to this thing, but there was really not a whole lot of direction as to what we were supposed to do, like in the movie. Like, what was the movie about? Who was it about? That was up to us. So we looked all over the country and talked to thousands upon thousands of young innovators of all ages, doing all kinds of things in science, technology, engineering, and innovation. We found 4 that we followed, and we made 4 episodes to turn it into a documentary series. And one of those episodes, called The Launch, is what's screening here. That follows a young man who is disrupting the robotics prosthetics industry by making a robotic hand. For about $500, he could make a robotic hand that's better than anything that's in the market right now. And he did this all himself with a small team of college students, and they're launching it. And we follow them on that launch. So that's the piece that we brought to the festival.
There are 3 others. One that follows some young people in Napa who are in elementary school, and through the power of online communication and math competition, go from the shadows, literally, socially, where their parents are legally not allowed to be here, and live a recluse life supporting the really luscious community of Napa, California from the shadows. And now their kids are able to come out and get a voice for themselves and find empowerment, particularly young ladies of Latin descent, which is a great story. We have a story that takes place in Washington, D.C., in Baltimore, between the White House and an old rec center that gets turned into a tech center, and is part of the rebuilding of Baltimore following Freddie Gray and the disasters of Baltimore, and the Obama administration in particular really getting behind a Johnny Appleseed who was able to take an inspiration for how to turn old rec centers into absolute places of innovation on every single street corner. And the last one was with Elon Musk and college kids who were at the very launch of the Hyperloop, which is the advanced form of transportation that you're hearing a lot more about, and you're going to hear a lot about, and pretty soon you're going to roll down your window and go, and it's going to go right by.
That's amazing. But you said that you saw over thousands of people,
right.
and then you picked these 4.
Right.
So what was the aha? These 4 have to be our first stories that we're going to tell, because I'm assuming that you want to tell more stories.
Absolutely. Yes.
They paid us.
You know, actually, that last part you said is really important, so I'll start from there in the answer, because we do want this to be more stories. So these 4 actually follow a pattern, a template, a format. And the idea is ultimately that many, many more stories can follow the same format. There's a lot of user-generated content in our movie. We give iPhones, like that one, to the innovators and tell them, record yourselves and send us the stuff. So make it accessible in a way that lots and lots of stories can be told. These 4 came forward, you know, actually there were maybe about a dozen that we really identified as like, wow, these are fantastic stories. They're happening now. They fit in our timeline of when we were in production. Because, you know, science happens very slowly most of the time. So a lot of really cool stuff happening, just it couldn't be our story. And then once we started filming, you just kind of get into the dirt of it, and you can feel where the stories are. And for instance, like we showed up at that old rec center turned into a tech center in Baltimore, and found a young boy that day who became the main character. If that boy hadn't come in that day, then maybe we would have gone in a different direction. But people sort of came into our lives in the right way, and we could identify them as filmmakers that this is a great story, and this is a good person to personify all these themes that we want the movie to be about. So we entrusted that these kids would do it. They showed a lot of tenacity in the very beginning, that they were going to see it through. Make it work. The title, kind of refers to the idea of tenacity and discipline and resiliency. Recovery after failure, recovery after failure, recovery after failure, and these kids that are in all these 4 stories, they all demonstrated this. So we put our faith in them, that if we showed up every day and filmed, they would bring a story back to us, and they did.
I would just add that we called this show The Disruptors from the beginning. That was the working title, and that's what we were looking for people who were disrupting some particular model, figuring out a way, despite all of that, to get it done. Make It Work is what we named it once the child was fully born and we could see it, and we were like, this is it. This is actually what it's speaking to. Because the original idea, back to your first question and sort of tie it up, is to celebrate the people who are celebrating their own passion with discipline and tenacity and perseverance to see it through. And there isn't enough attention in media pointing the camera at smart people just working hard. And what they look like or where they come from or how much money they have or any of those things are completely irrelevant to the fact that we all have 24 hours. And what you do with it's up to you. And these are stories about people who wake up and get it done.
Now, when you met these people, how did you have an idea of how it was going to turn out, what you wanted them to focus on, or did you just follow them and then see what evolved, or was it a combination of both? Like, maybe you had an idea, you asked us, like, can you focus on this and this is the path we're going to take, or was it let's see and follow them for a day or two and see what kind of story it is?
Good question.
Yeah, all of the above. We try as much as possible to not be influencing the events as they go along. It's almost impossible not to. There were some rare occasions where we sort of put things in motion to sort of see what would happen, where we did get involved, more than just sort of a docu-verite kind of a thing. So like one example would be in this Baltimore story at this makerspace. The same day that we met this young boy Samuel, we also saw at a separate part of the event this older gentleman who came in with a severely handicapped son, who was maimed in a car accident that took his wife and maimed his other child. And from that accident, there was a huge settlement, and with that money, he wants to transform disabilities and the lifestyle of people with disabilities now that he sees the life his son lives. So he comes into the one door. Disruptor. There you go. Little Samuel's another door, looking around. Oh wow! Like, what is this? Oh, a 3D printer. Oh, how does it work? And we were the ones who said, Samuel, you should listen to what that guy is all about. And that's all we really had to do. And then make sure we were there when the two of them met, when the mom came over to shake the hand, and the gravitational pull pulled it together, and it became our A story. And we didn't know that was going to happen. It was just a sense of like, these two things might go well together. So,
we did that about a half a dozen times in that space.
Yeah, but that was the only time it really actually stuck.
Correct. But we did cast a half a dozen nets, and the second one was the founder of that space and his journey to the White House, which was thrilling for him to go from such anonymity of a 4th grade teacher transplanted from Alaska to Baltimore in an all-black neighborhood where it was definitely new for him, to being frustrated with the system and having the courage to say, I'm not getting enough out of this as a teacher, I'm not getting the breakthroughs with students, but I'm going to take that old beat up building and I'm going to turn it into something. And no one caring, to taking it to the White House and getting the megaphone and him walking down the halls of the White House in his bow tie with a sense of pride, it just melts you. And you realize that there are millions of stories in this country alone and tens of millions of stories around the world just like it. And the camera needs to point towards it, and the best way it can point towards it is for us as filmmakers to provide a format to empower others. A, because we can't be everywhere, and B, most importantly, it's not about us.
Now, there's so many stories out there, so many people, so many places. How did you know to go to that place, to cast your net wide? Why didn't you cast your net wide somewhere else? Or You know,
Yeah.
how are you getting the sense of where it's going to bear fruit, or is it a lottery?
There was, well, both. Again, all of the above, really. This was an interesting thing, and we talked about this a little bit in our Q&A after the screening the other night, because, you know, as a documentary, usually you know who your subject is from go. Like, that's why you're making a documentary. This is your subject, and they're important or interesting, and so we're going to follow them. In this case, we had this big, like, heading, and we had to fill it with real people who could represent those themes. That is basically like a reality TV show. You have a concept, and then you need to go out in the world and you got to find people who you can cast into your concept. So we turned to a colleague of ours who worked in both documentary and reality television and said, how do they do this in reality TV? And she came aboard as a casting producer, and she helped us to build a framework to do it, where you make a questionnaire. And you basically publish the questionnaire online, and there's various ways of sort of getting it out to micro communities, you know, that are relevant to your concept. And everybody sends in these secure, responses, and it's all in a spreadsheet that you can go through, and you can kind of read and see what people are up to, and check the ones you like. And then you go back and you follow up with them, and then you do a Skype call, and then you get some of the personality. You know, are they telegenic? Are they articulate? Do they know what they're after? All that kind of stuff, and then it starts to shake down, you start to sift it. So that machine was really helpful. But I must say, I mean, we got that machine out to tens of thousands of people, most of them through Chegg, is that the
Yes, the publisher.
Chegg, the publisher of textbooks. They
95%
helped us
of all the textbooks.
get it out to universities. So a lot of people got to see this questionnaire. So we got, and from those tens of thousands, we got like 1,000. And of those 1,000, there were a couple dozen that were like, hey, these are really interesting. They fit in our timeline. And you can see how it starts to shrink down. We got one story. The story that's here at this festival came through that machine. That was it. One story. But that's what we needed. It was a great story, and it worked out awesome. So that machine provided that. The others came from.
And that machine's part of the format that allows it to carry forward as a
right.
series as
That's
well,
right.
which is important. We did invest in this because we had the opportunity, and it's fair to point out that that's rare in these situations. Oftentimes you have to make this film and then sell it, and you sell it for what the market feels it can absorb, which is oftentimes a lot less than it would take to put this sort of thing together. Legendary Pictures, by virtue of its A business, which is massive tentpole feature films and an appetite for large investment, saw this as a rounding error to their catering budget and said, we can actually do something really good if we give these guys, enough rope. So we were able to build out these structures like what Kern's described.
That's right.
And that's unique, and we're fortunate. We've been doing this for a long time. We've been doing this since we were little kids. So there was momentum leading into this. Yeah, exactly. This wasn't our first picnic. That was a good one. Delicious.
Is there a time frame that this has to get done in terms of finding the stories, or are you looking to hit like certain stories at a certain time? Is there like a theme that you're looking for, like blocks of stories will be themes of people that you're looking for, or is it just going to be like something weekly, monthly, yearly with a block? So
Good questions. Sure.
Do you stand down?
Sure. We actually very much believe in schedule, and it's important. In documentaries, there are generally three main parts to the creative process. One is the idea of what you sell. The second is what actually happens that you film, which might be very different from what you sold or have different events. And then you get in the editing room and you start putting it together and realize that things in certain order play better than you had imagined when you were filming them, much less if you even conceived of them when you were writing it. In that process, it's important to nonetheless have a goal, like all things in life, we believe. Write it down, this is where you want to be, and then work yourself backwards, and put a schedule to it, so that you have a development, a production, a post-production, a release schedule, and that as best as you can, you stick to it, and you can assign a budget to it, and you can assign other people's responsibilities, and it's the only way to lead in a movie or an army or a large company, is to have that kind of structure in place. So that you know when, hey, you're off, you're behind, or how are we tracking on this, and how are these elements going to come together? Or now that we can have this schedule, we can step back, and in our case, we put it up on a wall. And when we put it up on a wall, we can, as my brother says, step back and see more, and stop getting so close and myopic to trying to solve one particular issue when you've got the longevity of your whole thing in front of you. And with documentary, it's crucial. Too many documentary people, I think, they feel because it's a documentary, you can just keep rolling. But someone has to go through and log that and edit it, and there has to be an understanding of why you are where you are, or you'll lose the muscle tone of your narrative.
That was a really great response on the filmmaking process, and so I'll answer it from sort of what happens after that, and because there are even phases after those three that you talked about, and this is actually, I think, one of the things that documentary and independent filmmakers, probably the most common mistake the successful ones make when they succeed in getting their movie made, is to think that finishing the movie was finishing the movie, and that's not, because it's about halfway on the process of then releasing the movie. And finding distribution and creating the marketing support and the publicity and finding who is your community and getting them to support you and the social media and all of that stuff takes just as much effort and sometimes even as much time as it took to do those stages that he was talking about. And filmmakers forget that, I think, or they don't know that. They get to the end, they think, like, spike the ball and they're at the 50-yard line.
Which is a fumble.
That's right.
By the way. Don't do a wiggle there.
So the after part, and you were asked about how would we see this coming out. We made this for young people. And when you watch it, it feels like that. You know, it moves quick and it's happy and it's colorful and it's just saying like we're having a great time. We know how young people consume media these days. It's in shorter and shorter amounts, and in ways that are more of a two-way street, and about community as much as they are about plunking down in front of TV. And so we designed the show to try to fit that format. So I could see with the right partner, and we still need our distribution partner. So far, it's just been Legendary Pictures, not a distributor. So we're now at that point. You guys, this festival is really a world premiere for this. So the next thing we're doing is finding those partners. When we have that partner, then there's likely different size content that we make. So there'll be the little 3-minute things that will stack up to 12-minute things, that will stack up to the 20-something minute things. And then there's all the ancillary stuff that can come around that. The conversation that we were asked to start, we now need to host. And so we really want to be able to build like a hub where different resources can come and connect with different innovators. They can use our stories as a catalyst for other ideas and other stories, and really make it into a community, like a hub for a community. So that's actually the design. What we made so far is the proof of concept content that can go out and try to manifest that.
Our way of doing it is we bake in the marketing and distribution part of the process into the very beginnings of development. So those first stage of those three I mentioned, we're already talking about marketing and distribution because we've done this before. Like I said, this is not the first picnic. And we don't show up at the picnic without the food and the blanket and the basket. We're like, oh wait. So we start making that stuff early on. And those partners help inform schedule and delivery and that sort of thing. And now ultimately will lead to the decisions that where is it best to premiere the show? Where's the audience, the widest audience going to find it? Is now the question that in today's market filmmakers get to ask, which is new to today. That if the widest audience can find it on an inch wide, narrow platform, and that goes miles deep, that's worth it, as opposed to really thin and really wide, and you're not reaching anybody because you're trying to reach too many people with something that's really too narrow. So we look forward really to these stages. We've been able to bat 1,000 in getting all of our movies distributed and get returns on investment, and we've been doing it for 30 years and over 20 documentaries, and more you've got to learn how to embed everything that he was saying early in the process, or you won't have the momentum and your title gets stale. It's just the timeliness of it starts to fall apart.
Now, it's interesting that you said that, you are documentary filmmakers, you've had a lot of successes, but you said something interesting with this particular project. You're trying to create a hub, a community, an outreach initiative. Are you part of that? Is Legendary a part of that? Like, how is that all going to work? Because, people make projects, but they make it for something, but you sound like you want to keep this conversation going and be part of that conversation. So how are you being part of it? How's Legendary part of it? Or is it just you and not Legendary and they just want to keep making the films
Sure.
about these people?
Sure, it's a good question. There are entities that are better built than Legendary for furthering and continuing the conversation. And those are the kinds of places I'm talking about that we baked in early on. The Khan Academy is a good example, to use them as one. Sal
Oh,
Khan.
they're quite good.
Pardon me?
I like the Khan Academy.
We love the
Yeah.
Khan Academy,
Yeah.
and Sal Khan, the founder and creator of the Khan Academy, is completely down with what it is that we've been talking about here, and been on the ride with us all the way along, and in the movie, and has offered that community that he has and the myriad of hubs and connectivity to which the Khan Academy can act as a host, if you will, so that Legendary doesn't have to invent itself into something that the Khan Academy is better suited to be able to do. But Legendary is there for continued marketing and support and the things that Legendary does very well, which is they tell people about their stuff. And we're fortunate that we were able to make this kind of film at a place that's used to a really huge, loud megaphone. And this time they can put science, technology, engineering, and math, and little kids, and people whose faces you wouldn't necessarily see in Legendary pictures. So it's a great combo, it's a great opportunity for everybody. And it should create something we'd like to think akin to a LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is a community where people of a like mind of wanting to connect their business interests come together. And there is a STEM LinkedIn community out there of all these very functional entities, from the White House and private to public entities that are all functioning that have yet to connect with each other. The Khan Academy is the furthest ahead in connecting these hubs. So we want to contribute to that entity that's furthest ahead in making what could really be the resource for the future and the future of innovation in this country.
So are you looking only for, like you just mentioned, in this country? I'm assuming you meant the U.S., but are you looking to expand outside of the U.S. and looking for more stories out there? Or is like the U.S. first and then slowly building up? Or is like STEM, affiliated with anywhere else in the...
It is
animals
anywhere.
in the
Before you answer, I just want to ask, I know I'm feeling a lot of light on
Yeah,
my
I
head.
see it changing
If
on
it's
you,
good for
exactly.
you,
It's
then-
fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed
Just
that
say
too.
normally
I was like,
flag
okay,
this
the
thing.
sun is
key light is
setting.
at the 3/4 from behind. That's
Yeah,
a good
man,
one.
you guys are glowing now.
Exactly.
So sorry, what was the we were about to?
I was asking because
Worldwide.
yeah, it was
Oh, yes,
basically
so,
worldwide
yeah,
is
that's
the
important
idea.
actually. So I mean, because this came from the mandate of a chairman of a studio, and his mandate was the kids in this country are ill prepared for their future. It wasn't the kids of the world. So we took on that assignment, understanding that he wanted to tell a domestic story, and Legendary was our client in this case. So we had that obligation. Our feeling also is that if we succeeded in doing what he asked us to do, we'd be creating a model for a global conversation, and it's just not that hard to turn it to international. So we're starting here because that's what was asked of us.
Correct.
That's wonderful. Now, you said like you decided to show it at a film festival first off. Why a film festival? Why not just like go and just show it at a market or do screenings around like schools? Why a festival
Sure.
first off as the was it to see? And,
All
and
of
by
that-
the way, thank you for choosing the Awareness Film
You're
Festival,
welcome. Sure.
which is a social-based film festival, which is not that many in the country and around the world, and it's all social causes, and education is part of it. So, thank you for choosing this
You're
one.
welcome, and thank you, and that's why.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a very formal rollout to this. It's Legendary Pictures, and there'll be all of the normal rollout. But we did get ahead of it for a couple reasons. We had a little window when they weren't paying attention, and so we did it, and we wanted to because we believe in kind over matter. That it's more important sometimes to violate the strict marketing business principle of how to make sure nobody sees it and keep it really close, to sometimes it's just good to be with the right festival or right people, or where an audience is coming with the right frame of mind to seed a project and to get it going. For filmmakers, a chance to see it. For your crew, a chance to sit with it. We're going to show it at the Napa Film Festival because those kids in Napa deserve it, and their parents deserve it. And yes, it interrupts potentially the San Francisco release to some extent because there might be press, and I get it, we've done it. But it's the kind thing to do. It's the right thing to do, and so we'd rather do that if given the choice.
More power to you. Thank you for that. Now, I wanted to ask you, what was the most interesting thing out of this whole experience for this first episode, and all the people that you found that surprised you the most? Interesting and surprise.
Yeah, I spent most of the time on filming on this episode because we did all 4 of these at the same time.
You mean on this episode in particular?
Yeah.
This episode or the other 3 that you talked about.
Okay.
I won't restrict you. Remember,
Let me come to mine
surprise
first
and
because
interesting.
like my ears are still turning on like what sort of took me by surprise.
I suppose, personally, for me, I was surprised at how, for me, I'm the business side of the two of us. And so I tend to set up the deals and arrange things and put it in the neat micro focuses and make sure that they're delivered on the highest possible level possible. In this one, we blurred a lot, which we do a lot because we've been doing this a long time. But I was surprised at how easy it was for me to throw 50 pounds of camera on my back and drive to the airport over and over and over again by myself, filming with little kids. And I captured a lot of footage in this series. And that's not like me because I produce a lot and I produce a lot of things at once. So it's totally, my cardinal rule is to not do that. And I just loved it. I loved the science. I loved how much I learned. And again, I go back to this thing, this kindness, which is a real commodity and it just is so there. And it's so easy to create and to be around. And it's infectious. And it was just more fun than The Office, so I was surprised.
You know what? I think maybe my surprise is probably the same one then, because I think it was really unusual for you to do those things and to stick with it. And particularly like the Baltimore story we've been referencing a bunch. Kip pretty much filmed that entirely on his own. I was there in the beginning when we first met Samuel. I think I came out maybe one other trip, but otherwise Baltimore was Kip's zone, and he took that. And that's in their 20-something years, 28 years or something we've been doing this. Like I don't know, I can't remember the last time. It was in the 19-somethings when last time that he did that. And I'm happy you did that because it's first of all, you're really good at it, and it's nice to see that you go out there and you can do those things. Also, I think it would remind you it's important to get out of that office and into the field, and to be there with a camera in your hands and responsible for asking the right questions and for lunch and for all the stuff that happens in between, so that when you're back in the office, you know what it is that you're fighting for and what it is that you're doing with emails and paperwork and meetings and all those things that are not actually the filmmaking. Because there's a lot of people who spend most of their whole careers thinking they're in filmmaking and they never actually are making the films. They're just swirling around all the activity that goes on before and after the making of the film. So it was surprising because it wasn't necessarily how we do things, but probably one of the really great surprises of this show was mixing up those roles.
That's great. Thank you. And what a really nice gift. What the power of that is find yourself a great partner and invest in each other. It's not always easy, but you get this kind of a conversation where someone really cares. I did this on Hallowed Ground, the show we won the Emmy for.
1989. That was the 19-something.
2 decades ago, 20 years ago or something. I remember being left alone to film a little piece that made it into the show, and thought, holy shit, like I can do this, And my brother believed in me, and the way that he became a director was that we were selling the show.
Yeah, so I have to say it because I think the initial intention of this little panel interview was getting started in the film business, which all we talked about is the tail end of it, But this takes us to, that movie was the first movie that I directed. I guess we both co-directed it, so it was the first movie that we directed. Although I did most of it because I did most of it.
Yeah.
The reason why I was directing that movie was the network was trying to get somebody famous to direct the movie, and they couldn't afford anybody famous, and everybody kept saying no. And they said, well, who are you going to get to direct this movie?
And get to that.
And Kip
they
said,
made this whole list, and I was like, oh, be stupid. Denzel's not directing this. My brother's directing this movie.
And he volunteered me to direct the movie, and then I got this call, like, hey, you're approved to direct the movie. I was like, I didn't even know that I was like in the running to direct the movie.
Just ask. What do you want? Ask.
So off I went to live in Harlem. This kid from Newport Beach, California, like Ivy League boy, off to Harlem to live in Harlem for 3 months and make a movie about, the most important little patch of asphalt that exists there for many people, which is Rupper Park. So it is just sort of,
it's partnership.
It's having somebody push you into the uncomfortable space you wouldn't step into on your own, and then once you're there to embrace it and realize pretty quickly, like, hey, actually, I can do this.
That shows up on the screen too, because your subjects catch that. They get that. and they start to feel comfortable. It's like, hey, their kids are yelling across playgrounds or whatever. So love is a thing that you do actually put up onto the screen, and your audience will feel it, and they'll also feel the aggro, all the other stuff, which has actually been a lot of the framework of the industry for too long. Yeah.
Although I did most of it because I did most of it.
Yeah.
And the reason why I was directing that movie was the network was trying to get somebody famous to direct the movie, and they couldn't afford anybody famous, and everybody kept saying no. And they said, well, who are you going to get to direct this movie?
To get to that.
And Kip
they
said,
made this whole list, and I was like, oh, be stupid. Denzel's not directing this. My brother's directing this movie.
And he volunteered me to direct the movie, and then I got this call that, like, hey, you're approved to direct the movie. I was like, I didn't even know that I was, like, in the running to direct the
Just
movie.
ask. What do you want? Ask. There.
So off I went to live in Harlem. This kid from Newport Beach, California, like Ivy League boy, off to Harlem to live in Harlem for 3 months and make a movie about, the most important to get to the point where he could, write the one that he really wanted to write, and now we're working hard to get that one, and it'll be on a whole other level.
Right.
So diversify, if you're really diligent about the writing, and you're open to good criticism, and you continue to diversify in your writing, then over a short period of time, you'll actually start to get relationships, and you'll have like a commodity.
So I have just finished working on my first feature film script. It's a working script, very working stage script, and I applied for the Women in Film Feature Lab to help workshop it, and I actually got into the next evaluation round. So thank you. So we'll see what happens. But I guess I don't know where to take it after that. It needs a lot of work, rewriting, and since I don't really have a whole lot of community, I'm volunteering and getting involved and trying to meet people and sort of network and create relationships. But I guess do you have any advice or anything that you might give to a beginning filmmaker who wants to go into the process because they love making art and because they love doing something for a cause?
Great. First of all, I think you're well on the way to doing the thing that you need to do because you're writing. And if writing is really, if you see yourself as a writer, first thing what you might want to think about is where do you see yourself in the industry? What kind of a role do you want to play? But you said you mentioned as an artist, and writer is probably as close to artist as you can get within the film industry. So off of that, just write. When I was asking that question as a college student to a really successful Academy Award-winning writer that helped get on the phone for me to say, what am I supposed to do? How do I do it? And he said, just write. Hang up the phone with me and go back to writing. He's a very prolific writer, and he's that's how you do it.
Who came from another career.
That's right. He was an attorney. Yep. An attorney who decided he wanted to be a writer, and so he just wrote. He wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote.
Woke up 3 hours earlier every day. And that's how you get practical with what it is that he's saying. You have to change the discipline of how you're going about every single day if you want to change your career. And if you're not prepared for the discipline in what it really requires, then you're going part way to whatever extent into what this is. And it's easier to say it than it is to do it, because to do it is an everyday thing. To be a writer is to rewrite. It's what Arthur Miller told me. And I had the good fortune to produce a book, the only book he wrote, and that was his comment on it. What took so long? Every writer has to rewrite. I never really got around to rewriting this one enough. Honestly, I made that movie. I think it could have used another rewrite. So the discipline of your day has to change, and it starts with getting up earlier and making better use of your time. And I'm sure you're really organized and you're awesome, but whoever it is you are, if it's you or it's whoever, if anybody is hearing or whatever, that's really it. And that goes with eating right and balancing your whole everything. Honestly, I believe that if you wake up earlier, you start by drinking some water, you actually meditate or take some time out for some awareness so that you're aware of things larger than yourself. It helps you when you're in those moments, when your career can change, to be aware of this is a moment and that is your moment, therefore. And to have the confidence to step into the moment, which is something that people feel others. I know I radiated and said, oh, well, I don't feel like he feels, that sort of thing. It doesn't have to feel like me. It has to feel like it is for you. And the only way you're going to feel that way is if you know you put in the homework, and if you did, you will. Like these little kids in our Napa show. They don't have a big voice. None of them lean in, but they know when they're ready, and when they're ready, they just stick it. They stick it when they talk to the mayor. And you'll do the same if you actually have adjusted the discipline of your life to being a writer, which is what Ron Bass, who was referring to, did, who won the Academy Award for Rain Man, and because he woke up 3 hours earlier.
So, and then once you feel like you got a draft, you're also already doing the other thing that there is to do, which is finding a community. And that's really important because you can't really do this all completely by yourself. It's a collaborative thing that we do. And it takes a whole big wide community of people pushing things along, not just people who are line items on a budget, which is also a whole community of people. So being in writing groups and being a part of Women in Film and coming to festivals so that you bump into other people. This is what festivals can provide, is a place where people can bump into each other. And then when you do get to the community, when you share your work, and then don't personalize what you hear back. Because once again, writing is rewriting.
It's hard.
And you gotta really hear it from their point of view. And hear it from their point of view. So it takes, you have to listen empathetically to the criticism that you're getting, to your own work, which is really hard to do. So I'm saying all these things, struggling myself to do it.
Meditation helps a lot with that, because you don't, you start to understand you're more of a sky than attaching your emotions to every cloud that goes by. These are going to come and go. But if you see yourself backwards from that, step back and see more, or however that is, you can get away from it. This is why it's more than just work hard. There's also balancing it. Because LA is hard to do that, but the community is big. The community is huge. You mentioned that word.
And then, so then looking forward to the things that you haven't done yet, I would say that maybe one of the most important ones is to keep writing other stuff. Because as a writer, you want to be able to have more than just a script. It's not really enough. You kind of need to bang the two rocks together, and so write in different genres that you still feel like you can be true to. Different voices show your range.